Let me start over. This is a meeting of the Wabash City Plan Commission. It's almost 6:30. This is January the 8th, 2025. I'm Board President John Burnsworth, and I do want to welcome some new members to the board. We're still one or two short. We do have a quorum. And roll call, please.
Bill Barrows,
Yes.
Scott Greiner,
Yes.
Mary Kramer,
Yes.
John Burnsworth,
Here.
Justin Adams.
Here.
Jason Sluss is absent. Chad Maple.
Here.
We're still missing the replacement for Pat Land. And then Heather Allen Hoover. Here.
Okay. First order is old business. Minutes from the December 4th, 2024 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look those over? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay. Next item is new business, and the first order is recognize new members with the election of officers for 2025. So I will open nominations for board president.
I will nominate John Burnsworth.
That okay, John?
I need a second.
I'll
Any other nominations? Have a motion to close nominations for president.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we also need to elect a vice president. So I'll open the floor for nominations for vice president.
I hate to put you three guys under the bus immediately.
If not, I will take over.
Well, I don't mind serving as vice, but I hate to nominate myself.
Okay, I will nominate Mary.
Mary Kramer.
Okay.
Second. Any other nominations? Motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have a president and a vice president.
You also need to select somebody to be the official secretary and the attorney for the Plan Commission.
Do
Okay.
we have any choice on the attorney part?
You're stuck with this. I'm sorry, Dad.
Technically, yes, but all of the attorneys in the city have to meet with the approval of the city attorney, so.
Do we need a secretary on the board, or is Jeff our secretary? Just
Usually we made the building commissioner
Okay,
the
okay.
secretary, yes.
I'll open nominations for secretary,
I
Plan
move,
Commission.
I move that Jeff Nee be nominated as secretary.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other nominations? I'll entertain a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second. Any more discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? I will now open nominations for board attorney.
I'll nominate Mr. Layden. Second.
Second. Any other nominations for board attorney? Motion to close nominations.
I move that nominations be closed.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Like I said, you're stuck with it.
Congratulations, Doug. And Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Wabash City Plan Commission Resolution Number 1, an amendment to the subdivision regulations involving subdivisions of industrial property excluding such subdivisions from the requirements of the subdivision control ordinance.
And may I ask for thank you.
Mhm.
Explain that to us, please.
I'm struggling with laryngitis, so our current subdivision control ordinance has a somewhat cryptic statement that industrial subdivisions do not have to go through the normal subdivision provisions. It's a statement that the reason for it is that in this day and age, almost all industrial subdivisions are products of the city. You don't have somebody going out and buying a bunch of land and then trying to create an industrial subdivision and selling off lots. Because the economic development that brings industry here is a function of the city. Because I think that we ought to flesh out the exclusion a little bit more, and that's what this ordinance does, making it clear that the subdivisions still have to meet drainage requirements, still have to provide infrastructure. Again, it was assumed that if the city was developing the subdivision, the city would develop the infrastructure too. And that has always been the case, but it's not really spelled out. So I thought this would be an appropriate time to spell that out a little more clearly, that if the city creates a subdivision, you don't have to go through this process. If a private developer created an industrial subdivision, we're still going to want them to go through the process because they're going to be the ones that develop the street. They're going to be the ones that develop the rest of the infrastructure. And we're going to want to make sure that they do it the way we want it done.
So basically, this is fleshing out some of the issues that we had last year.
Yes. Mm-hmm. What will happen is if you approve this, it'll be certified to the city council. City council will meet. It'll probably be at the next meeting, which is this coming Monday. And city council can do one of three things. They can approve your recommendation and pass an ordinance amending the subdivision control ordinance in accordance with what's before you. They can decide not to approve and basically go against your recommendation, or they can do nothing, and if city council does nothing, it becomes an ordinance 90 days later. So if they,
Based on our action.
based on your recommendation, that's right. So if they do nothing, it will eventually pass. In the, I don't know, 25, 30 years I've been plan commission attorney, city council has always acted on it one way or the other. And probably 95 to 99% of the time gone along with your recommendation.
Any more questions?
I'm just thinking for the people here in the audience, is there any sort of way that you can give, I realize it's complicated. Can you give a short, I know you explained it kind of to us, but it's just a way to introduce it to the audience so they have a general idea without.
Well, basically, it says that the city can create an industrial park or subdivision, and once It has been created. It may be further divided without plan commission approval. And the process set forth in chapter 10 regarding subdivisions would not have to be followed. Again, when we create an industrial subdivision, we never know how many industries might want to move in there. And we don't know whether they want a 5-acre parcel, a 10-acre parcel, a 20-acre parcel. We've got 5-acre parcels out in the Northeast Business Park, but Ford Meter Box wanted 90 acres. If you divide them all up, you've gone through an awful lot of work and expense. And if somebody comes in and says, we want all 4 of these because we want that much acreage, you've sort of wasted some time and effort. But if you don't divide it up and we don't make it clear, then what happens is when they don't want 40 acres but only want 5, you have to go through the subdivision approval. And that is an expense and time and effort on behalf of the incoming industrial or commercial use, and can be a deal buster, especially if they're very time sensitive. So this will allow us to basically build the infrastructure, leave it in one big parcel, and divide it off as the incoming users want it.
So once, let's say, I'm just saying 100 acres because it's easy math.
Mhm.
So we've got our 100 acres, it's zoned appropriately, and then the city can say, okay, and at that point can just market it as needed to those who are interested.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. Without any further action from the plan commission.
Makes sense to me.
Any more questions? I'd entertain a motion.
So move.
Have a motion
I'll second.
and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Bill Burrows.
Yes.
Scott Griner.
Here.
Mary Kramer.
Yes.
John Burnsworth.
Aye.
Justin Adams.
Yes.
Jason's not here. Chad Maple.
Yes.
And Heather Hoover, or Alan Hoover.
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the City of Wabash ordinance to be reviewed as the possible ordinance for the solar and wind energy systems, with explanation and discussion for new members to review.
Last year, about midway through the year, the issue of industrial solar fields came before us, and we recommended to City Council to put a moratorium on the development of those until we could develop some standards for them. Toward the end of the year, we got sample ordinances from 3 or 4 counties, and including Wabash County's most recent one, and a couple of other sources, and the state provisions with regard to industrial solar fields, and handed those out, asking the members to review those and decide what they liked and what they didn't like. And then we realized that nothing was going to get done before the Plan Commission had a substantial turnover in members. So we sort of put that on hold until the new members came on board. So if you haven't been given those copies, we need to get those copies to you. In the meantime, I got to thinking that it's a lot of material, and it's probably not going to be the easiest thing to work your way through. So the building commission, the building commissioner and Silas and Karen, we have, the other thing is none of them meet the format of our zoning ordinance. And I'm not in favor of approving any kind of ordinance that is not in the format that the rest of our zoning ordinance is in. So I have gone through with the help of the building commissioner's office and drafted a sample ordinance that does meet with our format. And we will get those to you in the next day or two for you to look at. And then I think all you really need to do then is look at, excuse me, the specific provisions and compare them with the other ordinances to see if you want to change the provisions that we have. I believe that the provisions that are in there are comparable to the state statute for solar fields. But for example, if you don't think the setbacks are good enough, you can look at some of the others and say, well, we ought to have a bigger setback, or we ought to have a smaller setback. If you don't like the decommissioning process, you can make suggestions on that. And over the next 3 or 4 plan commission meetings, we will be discussing any changes that you would want. I believe we're going to have somebody in next month we've had a number of citizens come basically wanting us to adopt the county's ordinance, which again, it's not in our format. So even if you like the provisions, you got to put them into our format. But we're going to have somebody in who's a pro solar field person, since we haven't heard from any pro solar field people so far, next month. And then in March or April, after you've had time to sort through all this stuff, we'll have a work session, which will be a public meeting, and therefore it will be open. But it will be basically for us as a plan commission to hammer out what we want our ordinance to look like. And then it will get advertised, and there will be a public hearing where we will take comments and testimony and evidence from the public before we make a recommendation. We might decide to tweak what came out of our work session. And at some point, hopefully before the middle of the year, we will have an ordinance that we can recommend to the city council.
Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you guys for all the hard work. It literally was a pile of stuff.
Yeah, as an example, our current zoning ordinance has a section dedicated for definitions. There are probably, and I haven't counted them, but it goes up to you. However, so that's about 4 times 26 definitions. And with the solar ordinance, we're going to need to add probably another 30 to 40 definitions. Well, I want them to be in with all the other definitions so that when you want a definition, you only have to go to one place to get the definition. That's what I mean about formatting. The other thing is, it's certainly my suggestion to you that a industrial solar field or wind energy system be what we call a special exception. So that even if it's permitted in, let's say, an industrial area, it still is not permitted there at the specific location unless approved by our Board of Zoning Appeals. Because for instance, if you have the area out on Mill Street is zoned industrial, and a solar field there may not have some of the same issues as a solar field in an industrial area like, weird example, but Wentz, where they are out on Garfield and Grand Street, that's industrial, but there's a lot of housing there. So even though it's industrial, you wouldn't want to put a solar field there. That's why I'm recommending that it be a special exception.
That makes all kinds of sense.
We do that with hospitals, junkyards, dumps, landfills, gas stations, all kinds of there. We've got in section 10, telecommunication towers. In section 10-71, where we list our special exceptions, we probably have close to 30 special exceptions. CAFOs are a special exception.
So the special exceptions would be just generally something that could be questioned or maybe
Yes.
not? Okay.
It would not be an automatic. If somebody said, well, it's permitted in industrial and this is industrial, yes, but we need to see how it's going to affect that particular neighborhood before we approve.
Any other questions from the board?
So we move forward just in saying that we'll all get the necessary information and then plan on working. Okay.
Mhm.
Any comments from the audience? Okay, that's all the business.
You all right? Yeah.
I have to turn that on.
I think it's on.
I thought I turned it on.
Hello,
It's on.
can you hear me?
You have to hold it pretty close to your mouth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't really have anything new to say. I mean, I just kind of wanted to bring up some points to the new members. I mean, you all have basically seen me a few times here and I spoke in front of the city council, but, we're in a special situation in the buffer zone. We are in the country, in the city, not really either one, and we would just want to be sure that we're well protected and that there's, good policies and regulations and whatever in place, to protect our way of life, basically. We are what everybody sees when they drive into the city of Wabash. We're concerned, of course, for our properties, the environment and the city of Wabash. I mean, they've worked very hard to make, Wabash better. So, Yeah, I mean, we just have a lot of concerns about the solar overall. I'll just cover a couple of them, the ditches and the drains, the runoff into our rivers, streams, and reservoir, the road damage from the heavy equipment during the different phases of the construction, the noise levels, the impact on the wildlife, and the decreasing property values. Some of our additional concerns are around the rapidly changing technology, changes in the government funding or other solar initiatives, or wind, firefighting hazards, safe disposal of damaged or broken panels, and the permanent or decades-long loss of farm ground due to the precious topsoil that is removed in this process when the ground is turned into industrial solar ground. So, basically, I just want to, plead with y'all to do, what's best for all of our citizens. We have a lot of buffer zone property around our area, and it can impact a large number of our citizens. So I just thank you for, your consideration. And I know this is a lot of work, and we appreciate all of your time and effort.
Thank you.
Chris Hickman. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but some things that have seemed to come up in the past month and a half or so. There are a lot of counties that have jumped on board with solar, and they've now said, whoa, we didn't have stuff in place to protect us. And they put a moratorium in place because they found out that 1,500 acres was turning out to be 20,000 and 25,000 acres. And so I would just be mindful of the fact that if there's not a check and balance in place, that a lot of land could be consumed, where you could have housing. I know we're talking industrial, but that buffer zone, we've got kids moving back from the East Coast just to come back to a nice, quiet country way of living, and they're going to be in that buffer zone. And then the last thing is the decommissioning process. That can be really treacherous because depending on how things are worded, some counties have found that the contract that was signed, it was ultimately sold to somebody else that now negated that contract. And so they have a fresh new contract without all the guarantees. Also, when it comes to bonding for the decommissioning process, they don't put that money up front. It may take 10 years before they start to put the money into the bonding because they say the expense of our solar is so great that we're putting all of our money here. Don't worry, we'll put the bond money in there eventually. And I would want the money right up front. And then how are they basing the decommissioning process? Are they the ones that are doing the actuarial studies and determining what the final cost is going to be to decommission? And do you want to trust the fox watching the hen house, or are you going to do your own studies to maybe determine that, to have the figures more aligned with what would be realistic? And because at the end of 30 years, somebody's got to pay the bill. And if they're not around, the city will have it. So those are concerns. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I decided to stay here because I just love the community. It just was a great place to raise a family, and it's a great place to live. So I just want to see it stay that way. And thank you for the thoroughness and things. And I love the idea of the special exception and things. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Suzanne Peebles. And there are 3 points that I want to remind you of, those that have already heard us talk, but this is all really based on tax credits, a lot of this, and we feel like, especially for the ag ground, that if the tax credits weren't there, they wouldn't be fighting so hard for the solar companies. And 2 of the families represented here have gotten letters from solar companies and they're in the buffer zone. So that's the reason that we came last spring or last summer, because they're being asked, they aren't interested, but we need some protection there. And we're not far from the buffer zone. A lot of us aren't far from the buffer zone, so it would affect us. And we also ask that you, because the buffer zones, you're in charge of that, the city is, I would ask that you carefully look at ag ground in a different way than you would your city limits. Because most of the city, you can't get much for solar as far as the acreage, but you can in the county. So it's gonna be tricky the way you do, but I just ask that you remember that too. Thanks again for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that is all.
I would like to comment for the benefit of the new members. There's been reference to the buffer zone. And you may not understand what that is. And so Indiana statutes allow a city to have zoning jurisdiction in an area up to 2 miles outside its city limits. So normally we make decisions based on what's in the city. But when it comes to zoning, we can also make decisions in that area around the city. Now, because of city expansion, there are some places where our buffer zone, if you will, our territorial jurisdiction is nowhere near 2 miles. In fact, we may be right up against it. But in other places, yes, we've got close to 2 miles of ground outside the city limits that is subject to our zoning jurisdiction.
Doug, if I can interrupt, so if the city limits expands, the
Mhm.
zoning boundary doesn't expand
It does not
automatically?
expand.
Okay.
No. And similarly, if, just to give a wild example, if we said there could be no solar in the jurisdictional area, and somebody wants to put in a solar field, buys the land and comes in and asks to be annexed into the city, if we annex them into the city, as long as 100% of the landowners want to be annexed, they can be annexed. And our zoning ordinance might at that point in time not apply if we are talking about preserving area, buffer zone area, and having something different for inside the city limits. But anyway, the idea behind the city having zoning jurisdiction outside the city limits is so the city can have some control over how that area develops, because that's where the city is going to expand if the city expands. And in the last 50 years, we have expanded beyond our city limits, our old city limits, into parts of what were the territorial jurisdiction that we had. And so when you go to consider the zoning ordinance, one of the things that you are supposed to do is to consider how your zoning ordinance will affect the city's ability to expand, to develop in a way that the city wants it to develop. So that's just one more thing that you will need to consider. But it's a somewhat unusual situation in that we've got jurisdiction, not for everything, but for some things beyond our corporate limits.
think that's something for the park board needs to be this really good around.
Step it up there.
That's our game.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Comments?
I have a question. May I ask a question? Lathita Metzger. Really?
I forgot to say my name, I'm sorry.
We know who you are.
I know.
Can you tell me
You're
when they,
talking- People can't hear that are
can you hear
watching.
me?
Yes.
Here
Can
we
you
go.
tell me when they established that unincorporated area?
1966,
1966?
yes.
Okay.
And-
Do you have a detailed map?
There's a map in the building commissioner's office.
Okay, thank you.
It should be on the website.
Yeah, it's on, yes, it's on the website.
And there used to be really distinct signage, like on the main ways out of town. I say that because I'm down on Milford Pike. There used to be a sign that says zoning boundary, City of Wabash.
Right.
It got taken out in an accident a few years ago. It's never been replaced. And so I think there are, maybe places that we should reinitiate signage just to make it a little more obvious.
I think what I'm getting at is a detailed map, like
If
the streets where I can
if
see
you
it
go-
rather than just,
the one on the city's website is a PDF, you can zoom in
okay.
down to the parcel.
Is it on the GIS? Is it?
Yeah, it's also on the GIS, it's on.
Yeah,
the
it would be on the GIS, so again, online there.
On the GIS. you can find that.
And that you can zoom down and get it down to the street level.
Okay, if nothing else, we're adjourned.
We're at the wheel you.
No kidding.
I'm